So Germany have opened their World Cup with a comfortable win against Curacao, and they can confirm their place in the next round for the first time in 12 years if they beat the Ivory Coast in their next game. So now it's time to look back at the Curacao game and look ahead to the game against the Ivory Coast. In the Curacao game, Germany comfortably beat them 7-1. They took the lead through Felix and Nemecha, and you're kind of thinking, okay, here we go. You know, Germany are probably going to rout them. But Germany are a bit off at the moment, like when they were playing, and as the game went on and they struggled to double the lead, Curacao slowly grew into the game. And as they grew into the game, they began to trouble Germany, especially on the counter, because Germany, even though they probably don't want to admit it, Germany were kind of like everybody eats, and so they were just flooding forward. And that obviously was leaving loads of space for Curacao. And then the unthinkable happened and Curacao equalised through Comencia. But then unfortunately for Curacao, when momentum was with them, there was a hydration break. And this is a common theme throughout most of these, or some of these World Cup games, is one team is building momentum, has this momentum, and then the hydration break comes. And when the hydration break happens, it allows teams to reset, which is what Germany did. They made some tactical adjustments, and then they come out of it and completely swings the way the game was going. And a couple of minutes later, Nico Schlotterbeck scores his first ever Germany goal to make it 2-1. And then just before half time, Kai Havertz scored a penalty to make it 3-1, and then you're like, okay, it's over. And then after half-time, Germany just ramp it up. Jamal Musiala scores. Dennis Undav then comes on, assists Nathaniel Brown, scores, and then assists Kai Havertz again, and they win 7-1. And I think there's a good couple of players that come out of this with positives. Nathaniel Brown, he had a goal and an assist, and it was a good performance from him. Same with Felix Nemecha, Kai Havertz as well. And then Dennis Undav had a good cameo off the bench. And I think this should, if we were talking about a competent manager here who doesn't let his players decide, this should influence the decisions of who starts against the Ivory Coast. Because Dennis Undav showed that he can link up well with Kai Havertz. But there's one man on the right wing who is ruining everything, and that is Leroy Sané. Everyone is basically questioned, why is he here? What does he offer? And Nagelsmann's like, oh, he can play well for Germany. And then he doesn't play well. And then you've got his friends like Kimmich coming out and saying, I didn't think he played bad at all. And Nagelsmann coming out saying, I didn't think he played bad at all. When the reality is you have better players that are more in form and are more likely to not do what Sané did. Undav, for example, and in that case you play either Undav or Havertz behind the striker, and the other one as the striker, and then you have Wirtz and Musiala on the two wings. Or you bring in Jamie Lieverling, who can play the exact same role that Sané plays, but the difference between Lieverling is he's been playing in the Bundesliga and he's in form. Whereas Sané is shit and has been playing in Turkey. And you're thinking, it does get to a point where it's quite obviously cronyism going on there, and Nagelsmann is not having the balls to make difficult decisions when it comes to choosing or dropping players, especially when Kimmich is your captain and is a friend of Sané. So I'll die on the hill that Sané should not start against the Ivory Coast, because then if he starts there and has an okay performance, then Nagelsmann will be not a problem at all. Sané can keep playing. Then he may play against Ecuador, but I feel like Sané won't be useful against Ecuador, because Ecuador are quite a compact and defensive side, and what can he offer? And then you've got the round of 32, which Sané would then probably start, and then you've got the game against France, potentially, where Sané would probably start again and be so shit, and Germany will be eliminated. I just think if Germany want to optimise their chances to go through, Sané shouldn't be there. on the pitch. However, after I've said all this, from like a general performance, I don't think there's really a lot to take away from this because of the level of Curacao. Like, yeah, Germany managed to show some sort of resilience, maturity, whatever, that they were able to not panic and collapse when Curacao scored. But again, like, Curacao are not a high-level side. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration when we're thinking of takeaways from this game. I think the game against the Ivory Coast will be that we can then have a better look at to see the level that Germany have. But obviously, the argument, again, play who's in front of you. Because Cape Verde drew with Spain. And you can make the argument that individual quality-wise, Curacao probably have better players that are playing at a higher level than Cape Verde. And so on the Ivory Coast game, on Ivory Coast, they beat Ecuador 1-0 with a late winner from Amad Diallo in their opener. So actually both these teams can qualify for the next round if one of them win. And they were against Ivory Coast proved to be quite a decent attacking side. Ecuador, as I mentioned, they were quite a defensive side. The standout player, as we know, was Yan Diomande. He was really just running at every Ecuador player he possibly could. And there was like a nice moment where he dribbled past 3 Ecuador players, but then absolutely spooned his shot over the bar. Diomande will definitely be a problem for Kimmich. With his pace and with his trickery, Kimmich may struggle. And so Ivory Coast got here because they finished top of their group in the first round of qualifying for AFCON. They were unbeaten and they finished 1 point clear of Gabon. And so some of the players you may know that are in their Ivory Coast squad: Odilon Kosunu, who was obviously formerly of Bayer Leverkusen, Evan Ndicka, ex-Eintracht Frankfurt, Elie Awahi, current Eintracht Frankfurt, but I imagine he probably won't be there maybe at the start of the season. Bazimana Traore, who plays for Hoffenheim at the moment, and then obviously Diomande. And so when it comes to Germany's starting 11, they will most likely be unchanged against Curacao unless injuries crop up. And as I mentioned, Zane will probably keep his job. So I'm expecting it to be a fully unchanged side against the Ivory Coast. The only one potentially could be David Raum instead of Nathaniel Brown. But I feel like Brown's performance has justified him being like first choice left back. But as I said, you know, if I was to make changes, it would be Zane on the bench and you bring either Lieveling, who could probably do a better job at helping Kimmich, double team Diomande, or you bring in Undav and move Musiala out wide on the opposite flank to Florian Wirtz. However, obviously then the balance of the side is a bit different because you have a more of attacking left back on the left than on the right. And then if you have Musiala who's cutting in, you have no one that's really as mobile to do the overlap, for example. But again, I think Germany did play Ghana. They were actually meant to play Ivory Coast in a friendly in March. Because they drew them, they ended up playing Ghana instead. Ghana wasn't as easy as Germany probably would have liked it to be. And I think the moment against Curacao when they scored, I think shows the possibility that Germany are still not 100% when it comes to defending, for example. And an Ivory Coast side who are a lot better than Curacao could be a lot more dangerous to play against, especially with the likes of Yan Diomande. But I do expect Germany to win this, and I do expect them to finally leave the group stage of the World Cup since 2014.